I'm Terri Janke. I'm a Meriam Wuthathi woman. I was born in Cairns in far north Queensland. I am the Solicitor Director of my own law firm, Terri Janke and Company. Look, I didn't set out to start my own firm. I had really no idea where I would end up as a lawyer, and that was part of the journey, I guess, in trying to work out what I would eventually do. Law school doesn't really give you that pathway. When I was taking a break from law school, I worked in the arts, and that's what really fascinated me into the law of intellectual property and copyright. So I got to work on a couple of key cases there, focused my studies when I went back, and I really was so passionate about working in this area of law for Indigenous artists' rights, because Indigenous arts and cultural knowledge is so part of Indigenous identity and heritage, and it's often a way we connect with the wider community. So when those rights are threatened or at risk, it's very important for Indigenous artists, Indigenous people. So that's where I thought working in Indigenous cultural and intellectual property rights could be a pathway for me. And I had no idea that it would end up my own firm. I just happened to be writing a report called Our Culture, Our Future about 22 years ago now. And it really was the framework of a lot of thinking in Australia about these rights, Indigenous cultural and intellectual property rights, or lack thereof. And straight after that, I was just really thinking, well, how do I walk the talk rather than just be telling everyone we have these rights, go ahead with it. I thought, well, if I am to shine a light on Indigenous knowledge being really important, or Indigenous people being involved in innovation, I should go and start my own firm. But I really just had my second child at the time, and perhaps I just thought I could do anything. And I was just so inspired to start off my law firm. And some people must have thought, oh, she's crazy. But I've stuck with it, and it's coming on 22 years, which is, to me, sometimes I just feel like it's yesterday, it's gone so fast. But we've just been able to do so much and work with so many Indigenous and non-Indigenous people.
Wow, it's that's so inspiring. It's amazing. So what have the challenges been with creating your own company and doing the work that you do as well?
Yeah, it was in like the 1999 that I decided to set up the law firm. It started first running in 2000. And at the time, there was no Indigenous law firms doing commercial law. You know, there's an expectation that if you were an Indigenous lawyer, that you would be working in the criminal and justice system. So that was already a barrier, because people thought, what, you're an Indigenous lawyer and you're going to work in commercial law, intellectual property law. At the time, people really didn't have too much faith in me. I don't know if I saw it. I was just like running around trying really hard to get work and help. I did a lot of pro bono work to get out there, and I wrote a lot of articles because it, as I said, it fascinated me, and I just wanted to write and theorize or think deeply about this. And I wrote a lot of things which got published and got my name out there, and people then used it and wrote it in their papers. So it's sort of just, people got to know me from that. And I had some very good clients that walked in the door. My first office was in Redfern, and I remember Auntie Lorraine Peters just came in one day and said, oh, someone said there was an Indigenous lawyer doing intellectual property that set up, and I need some advice on setting up IP protection for my training program for stolen generations. So we helped her work on that. And 22 years later, we're still working with her and her team. She's an amazing woman, but we've had people like that come and back us. But it hasn't been easy. I think that it's always hard to compete with the larger law firms. I think that there was at the time a very strong sort of male bias in the legal profession, which has overturned in the last 22 years. And I've got to tell you, at times I felt really lonely and questioned why I could do it and how I would go on, because it was really difficult and it was not profitable. But I just kept at it, and we just have been able to go from that to a firm that, 16 people doing work. We're quite busy. The firm's growing, and Indigenous cultural and intellectual property is much more widely known. I remember when I started, I would talk about it and people were going, oh, what rights? Indigenous people don't have that. We can just copy the artwork from a book and put it on a dress, or use knowledge for a new medicine. But now these days, that has shifted in terms of international laws changing. Australia yet does not have laws. I don't think they're adequate yet, but there's been shifts towards policy and practice, and it's just now much more widely known. And we've been able to write protocols, do a lot of amazing legal work, and I guess hanging in there in those early years, and they were long early years, I'm talking 10 years, to hang in there, to build a firm from the ground up was so hard. And even if I thought I knew things about the law, learning to be a businesswoman was also hard, because you have this, I guess you're a bit shy of asking for money or talking about money and being, a businesswoman, but you have to build a pipeline of work. And for me, I had, all that sort of, how do I raise these conversations? But I think I got better at it. And there have now been a lot more Indigenous business networks that I link into, like people who are involved in Supply Nation or the New South Wales Indigenous Chamber of Commerce, and, my mates that are in business, and they have given me strength and also work. So I'm pleased about that.
Wow, what an incredible journey. I can only imagine how proud you'd feel to see how far your company has come. But just taking a bit of a step back, you finished law school, and what was your first legal job? And what were the experiences and skills that you learned to be able to be where you are today?
Oh, what was my first legal job? I had a few. I did some summer clerks as part of the law school. I went to the University of New South Wales. So it was the Aboriginal Law Program, and used to hang out at the Aboriginal Student Centre, the pre-Nurradilly, but I was there all the time. I think I was a bit nervous to put my hand up for these jobs that took you into big law firms, because I wondered what the culture was like and did I fit in. But I actually did go and work with a very large law firm. And I remember being quite nervous about it, thinking like, oh my God, they're all going to think that I'm here as a token, but I really learned a lot. I did 2 summer clerkships with a very big law firm, and it ended up that I got offered a job there, and I learned so much. So I worked in the intellectual property section there. They were all like, these were the people that were running the cases that were in the law books, and I was very much in awe of them. And to get to work with them was amazing. But at the end of my university studies, when there was like, what are you going to do for a career? I thought, I want to work with Indigenous people. I want to work on those cases. And there just weren't Indigenous clients going to those law firms. There are now, but at the time there weren't. And so I then decided to go to a smaller law firm that I could bring in Indigenous clients to. And I don't regret that. I think it was good for me. I got to work on projects that really enabled me to express that, the gap in the law, the protection that was needed, and develop my thinking along there. And it was really good. A bit of a long answer to you. What's your first job in the law?
No, that was fantastic.
I should also say I did also do a lot of volunteer work, and I worked as a volunteer to start with, but then as the copyright information officer for an organisation called the National Indigenous Arts Advocacy Association, and they ran this very famous copyright case referred to as the Carpets case. And that was absolutely amazing. And I met a very strong mentor of mine, Dr. B. Marika, who passed away recently, but she was one of the applicants in the case and just so inspired me to go and say, the gaps in this law of copyright, not protecting the deep story that's embedded in an artwork from being copied on a carpet where it can be walked upon. She really inspired me to work for changing the laws for the better for Indigenous people.
And speaking about these, so your volunteer roles, and you've also been a board member of a number of different Indigenous organisations, including Ngalaya. How did you manage all these roles as well? Were they all alongside your work and you building a company?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about what you learned from them, and also, how you managed them? Because it feels like you're Wonder Woman.
I don't know how I did it. I just, in those early days, I also was a mother of two small children, and starting a business, I was the president of Ngalaya at the time too, and we basically run Ngalaya from my law office. But I have always been on boards. I think I was on my first board at around 22, and it was always that part of volunteering or giving back to the community. But I've learned a lot from being on boards, and I'd recommend that as a pathway for Indigenous lawyers. It is a lot of work. I think that you shouldn't go on a board unless you're committed to putting in the time. There's too many risks for you not to be committed to it. But I've really learnt a lot. I've been on Indigenous organisations. I've chaired or been deputy chair of Indigenous organisations and also non-Indigenous organisations, and then government sort of companies like Tourism Australia, and I'm currently on the National Gallery of Australia's council. And I really think that the governance skills are needed for lawyers, particularly as we want to have these Indigenous organisations being Indigenous community controlled. And we need more lawyers to do the company directors course. I did that about 10 years ago now. It was a really good a base for my skills as the director, gave me confidence. But being a director really is a way to impact change and really impact social justice by using your brain, thinking strategically, and just giving time to good organisations from, it could be medical services, it could be a sporting agency, or it could be a not-for-profit that's contributing a lot to Indigenous affairs, or a non-Indigenous company. I've really enjoyed being on boards.
And what advice do you have for young Indigenous people who are thinking about a career in the law or studying law?
Well, I did not know that you could do what I do when I was in high school. I thought that all the lawyers were like the people on those television law dramas, and that you'd be in front of a court. And quite frankly, that scared me because I was quite shy and, didn't really know what I wanted to do. And So I would say to people who are going through school now, the law pathway is so diverse. You can do criminal law. Yes, I think we need Indigenous criminal lawyers, but you can also do commercial law. You can do information technology law, work in the film industry. There's so much, it's so diverse. But even when I went to university, I've got to say those sort of very conventional topics didn't give me an idea of what you could do. I did do intellectual property law, which was fascinating to me, and just linking into how that could empower Indigenous people, because I knew story and song and knowledge was such a strength of Indigenous people and a real opportunity. So when I finally pieced all of that together, I understood where my pathway was. So for anyone who's in high school now, I would say it's possible that the areas that you'll be working are not even yet known. So just if you go into law, do a lot of thinking about what motivates you, what you really connect with, and understand that law is so diverse, you'll probably find a pathway that you can connect with. And once you do, it will be you bringing your unique position and your mindset, your family knowledge, the way that you look at the world. You will bring your lens to the law. And we need that. We need more Indigenous people, Indigenous young people to bring that and energise what was a very traditional male white profession, but it's now moving for us to be, a strong part of the dynamic. And that's really important. It's important for the relationship of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people and the rights of Indigenous people in Australia. And we're looming into, the treaty sort of era. But it's also because Indigenous people are doing things that they've never done before, like they're running big companies, and they need lawyers to help them along the way. And this is where the way that you can help people is changing in a much more wider way than I thought as a kid. So please just look at law as a way to bring yourself to the profession, but that you will probably be at the cutting edge of it, bringing yourself to the changes. Be proud to be Indigenous. When you do come to university, connect with other Indigenous people. And I would say put your hand up for internships and opportunities. At Terri Janke and Company, we do offer internships. So don't just go to the big firms. Look for us sort of niche firms that are doing amazing things. I think just look at all the different opportunities to work for Indigenous people. And the other thing is to try and do as best you can in your studies. And that could be by bringing in where you can Indigenous topics to do for your assessment, which is what I always tried to do and got very good marks on. And reach out to lawyers. Yeah, actually do reach out to lawyers like me. Follow us on social media like LinkedIn. Try and connect with us at events. And, yes, come and hit us up for jobs if you're out there, and let's meet.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Terri. Yeah, it's such a privilege to be able to speak to you and to share your story with Ngalaya members and supporters. So, yeah, thanks again.
You're welcome. Thanks very much, Eliza.